Mrs. Iqbal on the phone.
Who?
Mrs. Iqbal.
Oh, what does she want?
Her mother-in-law's been trying to set fire to her again. She put paraffin on her slippers this time.
Oh, well, give her an appointment for next week, if she can wait.
I'm afraid Mrs. Price is rather busy in the house today. Would next Saturday be all right? 10 o'clock? Fine.
And if it happens again, she's to call the police.
Mrs. Price says you're to call the police, Mrs. Iqbal, if she does it again. Yes. Well, or the fire brigade, obviously. Not at all. Bye. Poor woman.
You're telling me?
Why does her mother-in-law keep trying to set fire to her? Don't they get on?
No, they get on like a house on fire. That's what she does.
Frightening, really.
Well, it was one of those arranged marriages, and the in-laws keep wanting more dowry.
What, and her father hasn't got it?
I don't think so, but even if he had, I don't see why you should pay someone to marry your daughter. Looking at most men, you'd pay them not to.
There must be some solution to the problem.
Yeah, there's usually quite a simple solution to all women's problems, Robert.
What's that?
Divorce him and buy a dog.
I think I'll go and have my lunch now.
What sort of remarks?
Well, I wouldn't want to repeat them, really.
Oh, don't worry about him. He's just my secretary.
Yes, we're all equal here.
Well, I'm sure you can imagine the sort of thing when you get a few men together. All they seem to talk about is sex.
Excuse me. If you don't mind my giving a man's perspective, that's not strictly true. We tend more to talk about things like the news or sport. In fact, men very rarely discuss sex with each other at all. What they do is talk about sex in front of women, but when there's not a woman there, they don't talk about it.
Thank you for that edition of Panorama, Robert. Anyway, Julie, if you want to pursue a case for sexual harassment, you're going to have to stand up and repeat what they said. So if you could, keep a record and write things down.
Well, then I'd be writing all day. It's constant innuendo, Mrs. Price. And it's not just what they say. It's got to them throwing pencils on the floor to have an excuse to look up my skirt.
Sorry, I cut my biro.
And I mean, these aren't yobbers, Mrs. Price. These are estate agents.
Is there a difference? Have you tried putting your complaints in a letter?
Yeah, and I got one back. It was heavy breathing in longhand.
Well, what about your boss? Does he know what's going on?
He's one of the worst offenders. Well, if anything, he encourages the other two. Well, that's what I don't understand. He's got a daughter of my age. Well, why does he do it? He wouldn't like it done to her.
He probably doesn't make the connection. How about your trade union?
There isn't one, Mrs. Price. It's just a small estate agent's. Well, it wasn't too bad when the property market was booming, but these days they've got nothing else to do. Well, it even happens in front of the clients sometimes.
It sounds as though you may well have a good case. My husband at the law centre would be better able to advise you. I'll have a word.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I like the job itself, Mrs. Price. I like what I do. It's just having to listen to foul-mouthed, brainless idiots all day that gets me down.
I know what you mean. It's the same where I work. Do you think she's got a good case, Jeff?
Well, I don't think the handle will come off. It's just, is it worth the trouble of lugging it round the courts? What's she going to gain by it? Even say it's all true.
Of course it's true.
Yeah, but just say it's true, and she goes to the tribunal, gets some compensation. The firm gets its knuckles wrapped. What then?
Justice gets done. Things change. This woman is being sexually harassed on a regular basis. It's 9 to 5 sleaze, non-stop. What's that up? You pull over and whoops, I dropped my pencil. They should not get away with it.
Well, maybe not.
Not maybe not, Jeff.
The point is, she's now stuck in an office with 3 blokes leching after her. But if she takes out a case for sexual harassment and wins, she's then stuck in an office with those same 3 blokes who now hate her guts. But what definition is that an improvement in her situation? Now, I mean, if she worked for a large company and was able to move to another department, fine. But you see, big laws just don't work for small businesses.
So what would your advice to her be?
Well, cut her losses and look for another job. Go in one day in a bikini, get a good reference and hop it.
What? So she should be punished for being victimised? No, I'm sorry, Jeff, that is not good enough. She has to make a stand. What's the point of having these laws if they're no use to anybody?
Well, they look good in leather binding.
The whole legal system is useless.
I tell myself that every day. Jeff, I say you've had a wasted life, mate.
You know, I don't feel like an MP, Norman. I'm an agony aunt, specialising in women's issues.
Oh, women. Yes, they can be very bothersome, these minority groups.
There are 2 million more women than men in this country, Norman. They are hardly a minority group.
Oh, I didn't mean numerical minority. I meant more in terms of importance.
But male MPs don't get half these problems. If you have a look at my postbag, I've got the sexual harassment case.
Oh, yes, my wife got a lot of that at work.
Battered wife.
Got several constituents married to women in that sort of situation.
Do you know, on average, it takes 32 incidents of domestic violence before a woman will leave a man. I mean, why?
I don't know, Jean. You think they take the hint?
You try finding a place in a refuge. Then there is Mrs. Iqbal. Her mother-in-law keeps trying to set fire to her.
Why, can't you get the extra heating allowance?
And yet another child custody battle.
Oh, yes. I had all that in my divorce. Child custody. It can get very messy. But fortunately, I won the case and she had to have them.
You know, all this is all so unnecessary, Norman. And do you know what causes it?
Yes, the Tory party.
I was going to say men, actually.
Yes, full of men, the Tory party. They got a lot to answer for. Oh, dear, more constituents' letters. Is there no end to this junk mail?
Never mind man's inhumanity to man. It's man's inhumanity to women we should be worrying about.
Mothers-in-law aren't men. It's not men trying to set fire to people.
That's different. That's culturally based.
Oh, well, that's okay then. We wouldn't want to offend any ethnic minorities.
I simply don't understand why men are so violent.
Some, not all. Violent people usually come from violent backgrounds. Anyway, where do most people usually get their first taste of violence? From their mothers.
Well, that's just a smack.
What, you're 4 years old getting your legs tanned by some 9-foot-high psycho with a hairbrush and that does no damage? Men might not be so violent to women if women hadn't started hitting them in the first place.
The reason why mothers chastise their children, Ken,
Chastise. That's a nice word for belting people.
it is usually because the father is evading his responsibilities by going off every night to his local refuge for 8 pints of in-depth counselling.
So, are you saying that men are spending their time hitting their wives when they really ought to be hitting their children?
I am not saying anything of the sort. You can have discipline without violence. I never hit my children.
No, me neither, but all seems a bit too simple, Jean. X chromosomes are all good, the Y's are all bad. It's sugar and spice on one hand and frogs and snails and a dog's backside on the other.
All I am saying is that might isn't right. You take the case I've got here, this poor woman. She gets divorced, she gets custody of her child, comes down to London to try and start a new life, and what happens?
What?
The father and some friend of his pick up the child from outside the school gates and vanish. The woman's distraught. She doesn't know where the child is, if she'll ever see him again.
And?
She's his mother, Ken.
Yeah, but the man was the father. Maybe he was a bit distraught at never seeing him again.
I think you're missing the point.
Am I? Which is what?
She was awarded custody.
Yes, and he was awarded access. But when your ex-wife takes your ex-child 400 miles away, it makes access a trifle inconvenient, doesn't it?
How do you know so much about it?
You're talking about Heather Campbell, aren't you? Her husband's my constituent.
Yes, of course. Oh, well, that's wonderful, Ken. Now, if you can find out where he is, then you can help get the child back where he belongs.
What? To its rightful owner? No, I'm sorry, Jean. I think I've already done that.
You can't legislate against human nature, Jean.
Of course you can, Richard. That's half the purpose of government, isn't it? To stop people doing what they want to.
Well, it may be the purpose of a Labour government. Killjoys unlimited.
I see. So you're all in favour of rape, murder and incest, are you, if that's where people's interests lie?
No. But obviously we have to have some rules and regulations.
Yes, so what's the point of having laws against sexual harassment if it's so difficult to get any justice?
Well, burglar alarms don't bite, but they still deter people. I just think you're taking a sledgehammer to crack a nut.
And it's quite obvious in this instance whose nuts it is need cracking.
Well, you can't deny that sometimes women do lead men on. Look at the provocative ways some of these women get dressed. I mean, wandering around in their skimpies. If they were posters on the underground, they'd be banned as being sexist. And how many times does a woman say no when she means yes?
Well, if yes means yes and no means yes, what word is there for no?
Yes, it is awfully difficult, isn't it? But things can swing too far the other way, and then men's rights are undermined. I mean, a man isn't even entitled to his conjugals anymore.
Why should he be entitled to his conjugals?
Well, if a wife's entitled to her housekeeping, he ought to get something for his money.
How would you feel if your wife suddenly jumped on you and demanded her conjugals?
I must admit I'd be somewhat taken aback. But I'm sure that most of this sexual harassment is nothing more than a little light-hearted banter.
Richard, a client walks into an estate agent's office where this woman works. Her boss says to the man, "Would you like a cup of tea? I'll get melons to make it." Is that light-hearted banter?
Well, it's probably just a nickname. Why, when I was at boarding school, they used to call me Chunky Marmalade.
I am talking about sexual harassment.
So am I. I used to have to sleep with my cricket bat.
Well, then, you ought to be more sympathetic.
I am, but you can't legislate against every little knock in life, Jean. And the fact is, there is no means on earth to prevent someone from coveting their neighbour's ass. Or indeed any other portion of their anatomy.
No, I agree, Richard. You can't stop someone from coveting their neighbour's ass, but you should be able to stop them whistling at it. And in order to accomplish this, I'm going to go out and kick some.
I don't know where he is.
I don't suppose you'd tell me anyway.
Look, Jean, he's a nice man. The boy loves him. He wanted to be with his father.
The courts thought otherwise, Ken.
Oh, well, as long as the child's wishes were taken into consideration.
They were acting in the child's best interests.
Yeah, and a child wouldn't know what they were, I suppose.
That isn't what I said, Ken. That's what the judge said.
Yeah, a woman judge.
What's the judge's sex got to do with it?
Well, it's always got a lot to do with it in rape trials. Why not in child custody cases?
You can't set yourself up as some one-man appeal court, some kind of Scottish Robin Hood. The mother got custody, that's it.
Yeah, and immediately legged it over the border so the father might never see his son again.
You could have visited at weekend?
Oh, of course, yeah. 60 quid fare and overnight in a hotel. He could easily afford that, especially with all the alimony he's paying.
You've certainly gone down in my estimation, Ken.
Oh, dear, that'll keep me awake at night.
To come between a mother and her child is unnatural.
Well, it's all right to come between a father and his child, is it? That's standard practice.
Who was this so-called friend who helped abduct the child from outside the school? That's what I want to know.
Jean, don't be so melodramatic. You can't abduct your own child. The boy came out of school, saw his father standing there and ran up the road to meet him, like...
Like what, Ken? Like some long-lost uncle? It's an amazingly clear account you give for someone who knows nothing about it.
All right, Jean, have it your own way. Every man that ever trod the face of the earth is a woman-hating child molester. There's never been a man did anything right. There's not a decent one amongst us.
Well, no argument there.
Excuse me.
Is it a man? Is it a rocket? Is it Mickey Mouse? No, it is an amazing new man with special ingredients doing the washing up. You may have seen him in the telephone kiosk changing into his apron.
You know what I like about you doing the washing up, Jeff? It's the way you bring it that unique sense of occasion. Oh, and by the way, how's sexual harassment?
Well, it hasn't been so bad since I stopped wearing those tight trousers.
Jeff.
Look, she needs some corroboration. At the moment, it's only her word against theirs, and they're going to say, but it wasn't sexual harassment, Your Honour. Just a bit of harmless verbal ping-pong.
But they are chucking pencils on the floor to look up her skirt.
But you see, you can't take a man to court for throwing a pencil on the floor. But worry not, Jean, I have the master plan. Here, it's my dictation machine. Tell her to put it in her desk and take a recording of what they say.
Thanks, Sherlock.
Elementary, my dear Klotz. Tell me, how are the child custody wars going?
I'm sure Ken knows where they are.
Well, perhaps you could beat it out of him. What are you looking for?
Oh, I'm just sorting through these old keys. I thought I'd clear them out.
And talking of abductions, do you see the paper? 3-month-old baby taken from her pram.
Oh, no. You feel sorry for them, though, don't you? Women like that who take someone else's baby. It's help they need, not prison.
Yes. Mind you, it could have been a man who took it.
They should lock people like that up and throw away the key. But his constituent, Norman, has abducted my constituent's son.
Well, maybe, Jean, but his constituent also happens to be the child's father.
That's got nothing to do with it. He's a complete red herring.
Wouldn't matter if he was a kipper and the mother was the Little Mermaid. Blood is thicker than the judge's decisions. That must have some small ball bearing on the case, surely. You can't go abducting him back. It's a ward of court case now.
Well, I do think you could be more helpful.
I am not on playground patrol duty, sorting out these little squabbles. I can't make Ken Miller tell you his constituents' whereabouts, can I?
I thought you said that 10 minutes in the whip's office you could get anyone to tell you anything.
Well, normally, yes, but the bulb's gone in my bright light, and we've had letters from Amnesty. No, you take my tip, Jean. Leave it to the lawyers. Let them tie a yellow ribbon round the old dirty briefs.
Well, Dreadful the way children get used as weapons in these divorce battles. Men who wouldn't even give their children a wash suddenly can't live without them. They just use them to get back at their wives.
Yes, it's very sad. My heart goes out to them, but what can you do? Tragedy of our times. It's an appalling situation. Didn't happen to notice what was on the menu for lunch, did you?
Never mind about lunch, Norman. I thought we were supposed to be the party of the family, too.
You know, I've been wondering just lately if we shouldn't be concentrating more on the orphans' vote.
Jean, there you are, excuse me. I wondered whether you had a minute.
What's up, Richard? You look like a hunted man. You look as though the dogs are after you.
Yes, well, it's either that or the cows. Care for a bracer, Jean?
No, my braces are fine, thanks. But don't let me stop you from having something to keep your trousers up. Have flowers been made tax-deductible?
No. It's this woman, Jean, this constituent. As you know, I do have my circle of admirers out in the shires.
Well, it must be the chunks in your marmalade that does it, Richard. What it is to be thick-cut.
Yes, probably something like that. And of course, having pop star status is all part of the job, for some of us. But this woman has just taken things far too far.
In what way?
Well, flowers, as you can see. Before, during, and after shave. Chocolates. Would you care for a box?
Oh, thank you.
And it's not just all this, Jean. She sends me underwear.
Oh, well, I'm sure an extra set of marmalade jars always comes in handy.
No, she sends me her underwear. And not just her underwear. She also sends me photographs of her wearing it. And more recently.
Yes.
Photographs of her not wearing it. And then there are all those telephone calls, of course. That's probably her now. In fact, the whole thing is getting extremely worrying, Jean. I received this morning, this invitation. She now thinks we're getting married.
But what about your wife?
Well, naturally, she thinks we're married already. I mean, I admit I'm fairly well polished, but I don't want everyone taking a shine to me.
How long has this been going on?
A couple of weeks. It all started with my cucumbers.
Your cucumbers?
Yes. My real cucumber campaign, if you remember, for British cucumbers with real taste and twisty bits. And none of your standardized foreign rubbish.
Yeah, I remember. EEC bureaucrats in cucumber lumber.
Yes. Well, obviously, it thrusts me into a certain prominence. And she's been badgering me ever since. I've been living the life of a fugitive. It's Ronnie Biggs all over again. In fact, I thought of making a public statement to say that I've embraced feminism. Do you think that might work?
Well, can't you call the police?
Well, I could, but it's not the sort of thing you want to get about, is it? I mean, a man who can't keep his women under control, well, he cuts a pitiful figure. Like a jockey who's fallen off his horse.
Well, I'd like to help Richard, but I don't quite see what I can do.
I just thought that as you're a woman, Jean, you would have a better insight into the illogical and devious ways a woman's mind might work. Why would someone become infatuated with me?
Yeah, good question, Richard. Though, be honest, you must have done something to lead her on. Have you got my rubber there, please?
No, I'm using my own. Is that my correction fluid?
No, it's mine.
Jean, this is childish.
I didn't start it.
Neither did I. Look, I'm sorry about this child custody business, but I cannot give you the man's address. My first loyalty is to my constituent, after all.
Yeah, and my first loyalty is to my constituent, Ken.
Yes, I know, but just because they're at loggerheads, it doesn't mean we have to be. I mean, I've got a great deal of respect for you, Jean. When you first started here, I thought you were a bit of a dooley, but you've come on really well.
Yeah, well, I love you too.
Good. Right, I'm off over to the house then. Golden slumbers.
See you later. Oh,
Hello, Jean. Sorry, did I startle you?
no?
Ah, young man.
Oh, Mr. Monk.
Tell me, is, Mrs. Price available to pair tonight?
Oh, she had to go up north for the day. I don't think she'll be back, so yes, I should think you could miss the vote.
Good.
Yeah. Yep, anything I can find out. Okay, I'll be in touch. Yeah. Bye.
Again?
Hello, Jean.
Everything all right?
Oh, perfect. You? Good trip?
Trip? Where was that?
Hadrian's Wall, the nice side.
Sorry?
I've just had my constituent on the phone telling me his son was picked up yesterday afternoon outside his school by his mother. They were then taken off in a car driven by another woman.
Yes?
Wonder who that was. I mean, what do you think you're doing, Jean? Kidnapping? Abduction?
Oh, don't be so melodramatic, Ken. How can a mother abduct her own son?
I mean, what are you doing? Playing God Almighty? Oh, I knew God was a woman. I didn't quite realise I was sharing an office with her.
Oh, I'm playing. That's good coming from you.
I've just had the guy on the phone. It was like holding a shower to your ear.
You'll get over it.
Oh, yes, of course he will. I told him that. I said to him, what are you, some kind of wimp crying over a bairn? You'll be eating quiche next.
That's simple.
Well, what about me, though, Jean? I was the one he'd confided in. I was the only one who knew where that child was. How do you think that makes me look? When I go back to my constituency, I'll have to carry a handbell.
You didn't tell me where he was. I just managed to find out for myself.
No, I didn't tell you, did I, Jean? But let me give you a wee bit of advice. Next time you open somebody's drawer, remember to lock it after you.
I was only thinking of the child. Ken? Ken!
So I did as your husband said and left the tape recorder in the desk. Then when they'd heard what they'd actually been saying played back, well, there couldn't be much doubt about it.
No, I bet.
Their faces were about as red as the air was blue. I think they surprised themselves. So the tribunal agreed that harassment had taken place and awarded me the compensation.
Oh, good. I'm glad it was successful. So, how are things in the office now?
I don't know, Mrs. Price. I was sacked when I got back.
Oh, well, at least the harassment stopped.
Yeah, but the bills haven't, though. I wonder if I shouldn't have just put up with it. Well, at least I'd still have a job and a salary.
No, it was a brave thing you did, Julie. You made a stand. It makes it easier for the next person, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, I hope so. Because it certainly hasn't made anything easier for me.
Well, people who want their rights have to be troublemakers or they don't get them.
Yeah, but you can live without your rights, but you can't live without a job.
Well, I'm sure you did the right thing, Julie. I'll speak to my husband and he'll make sure all the compensation comes through.
Thanks for everything, and I'll be in touch. Bye.
Bye. Is that it, Robert? Are we clear?
Just a couple of messages, nothing that can't wait.
Oh, anything from Mrs. Iqbal? She never kept that appointment.
No. Well, I suppose it all fizzled out.
Have her number, would you? I might just give her a phone call.